Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting Honestly educational stream. The last time I did an educational stream was 2 weeks ago. Wasn't that long ago. And the VOD for that is still up on both Twitch and YouTube. And it was about the Ninja Turtles. I got the opportunity to present that content elsewhere on a part of it at a PowerPoint party. And got to horrify people with Ninja Turtles facts yet again, which is really fun. I love to do it. I love to ruin people's day. Today, I'm not going to ruin your day. Today, I'm going to tell you good things, but also I'm not going to be yapping that much today. I had my teeth cleaned earlier, and got under the fangies, and they scraped all the plaque off the fangies, and you know what? My teeth hurt. My mouth hurts. I don't feel like talking that much. But the good news is that I don't have to yap that much because we have a guest today, and our guest is going to be doing all of the big-time yapping. They even brought slides. So we're going to go right to the PowerPoint in my very handy classroom. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and bring on the guest, and we're just going to go ahead and get started with that chat. Oh, I'm behind the PowerPoint. Well, that wasn't what I expected to have happen. I thought I fixed that. Kind of an interesting effect. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna put on my little light. There we go. My very, very, very quiet BGM that I like to have while I have talking happening because I can't withstand too much silence. And then I'm gonna get out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my Discord call. Hello, you are now on the air. Thank you for your patience while I got set up on the Twitch side.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hi. So I'm really excited today to be talking to Bryan Bove-Wimberly about their work in the comic space. And I would really appreciate it. Everybody was a really good little chatter / guest today. And I'm just going to let him go ahead and take over that presentation with the slides, and we will begin the lecture. Hopefully you'll tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you'll tell us a little bit about what we're talking about today.
Hi, yeah, I will definitely share about both of those things. Let's see if do you see the next slide?
Yep, it looks good on screen. So we have got the slides working. Yay! It was a little bit of a hacky situation with getting the Discord to load into the call, but it looks like it's working great.
Sorry, I see in the chat people are saying it's hard to hear, so I'll try to kind of lean in.
Okay,
if that helps.
I will turn your microphone up.
Okay.
Maybe that's on me. That should be way better for you guys, chat.
Is that better? Hopefully.
Yeah, I had turned up on that side. Yep, that should be fine.
Okay. Awesome. So this is just a slide that I do in like all of my presentations, but just I like to check in with the people that I'm talking to. So, you know, if you want to share which SpongeBob you are today, I see someone in the chat said I don't think I'm any of these SpongeBobs, and I kind of agree. I feel like these are all way too happy potentially, and just excited to be alive. I don't know. Maybe I'm 7 because he looks a little like. You know, but yeah, just hopefully everyone is well, and if you are not, hopefully you get to do something tonight or over the weekend to feel a little better. But today
did any of those SpongeBobs have a dental appointment today and have their teeth cleaned to the point where they're sore? Because that's me. I'm whatever SpongeBob has toothache.
Oh no. I'm so sorry.
Happy to fix that for you, Nacho. Yeah, it sounds like we're good on the audio now. It sounds like we need to turn you up just a tiny bit, but we're better now.
Okay, and I see that someone says 3x3 Squidward questionnaire. Fully agree. I'm much more of a Squidward too. So this is just a little introduction about me. So I am a comic studies scholar, although I think imposter syndrome, tells me that I'm not and never will be. But I do stuff with comic studies, so I guess that's what I am. I use he, they pronouns. I am the current webmaster for the executive board of the Comic Studies Society, which is a great academic society that I became involved with in, I believe, 2018, first as a member at large for their graduate student caucus. And I've attended a few of their conferences. Their most recent one was actually just a week ago, and it was wonderful. So, but yeah, so I'm involved with them, and then I'm a PhD candidate in American Culture Studies at Bowling Green State University, with a graduate certificate in that should say women's studies. Apparently, I didn't feel like finishing this slide.
Women's studies.
I'm sorry, it's women's studies. And in that photo with me is my dog Boki. He's a Welsh Corgi. He's 12 years old and still very spry. And
so cute. Love.
Yeah, he's the best. So this is a little bit about some of the work that I've done during my just academic career. So I have an article published in the Routledge Companion to Gender and Sexuality Studies in Comic Books that's edited by Frederick Louis Aldama, who is a great comic studies scholar. That article or that chapter is focused on Bobby Drake, Iceman of Marvel's X-Men comics. And that was the kind of first thing that I had published in comic studies, which was, really exciting for me because I don't know, it's always been a dream to be published. And then I have a chapter on the Savage Land from the X-Men, the animated series. That's coming out in a book, hopefully, I don't know if it'll be the end of this year, but maybe next year, called Futures of Cartoons Past, the Cultural Politics of X-Men, the Animated Series. That's through the University of Mississippi Press.
Oh, very cool.
Yes,
and X-Men's original cartoon from the 90s, yeah?
Yes. Cool. So, and this page is focusing on like the origin of the Savage Land in the X-Men comics, but yeah, it ties into the series, and that's edited by three really cool people as well. There's Jeremy Carnes, who is the current, I want to say, second president of the Comic Studies Society. Margaret Galvin, who has published several really great things having to do with queer comics. So fully recommend looking into her work. And then Nick Miller, who has something with K-pop coming out soon, which is kind of cool.
Cool.
And then this last picture here is it is my capstone that I did for my graduate certificate, but it was I think 18-page comic about Marvel's WandaVision. So it was called It Can't All Be Sorrow, Confronting Trauma Through Television in Marvel's WandaVision. And it kind of explores, her journey in the series and connected to my viewership of the series and kind of the idea of deja viewing, just kind of rewatching to deal with personal trauma, which is kind of what she does in the series, but in a much larger way because, she has magic. So that's some of my recent work, and that last one has not been published, but I am really proud of it, and I really like it, and I won an award for it at BGSU, and yeah, so I was happy. But that QR code goes to my webpage, which really needs to be updated, but there's more about me there.
I'm going to move your head so you're not covered, because right here your icon is covering the QR code. Funny, but it wants to scan it. Okay, that did. Sorry.
I think that might be the only scannable thing, although I think there's one more slide maybe. But yeah, so that is me. Why should we study comics or popular culture in general? This was a question that Countess posed, and it's a question that a lot of people ask constantly. It's like, what are you going to do with this? What's the point?
Right.
Blah,
right.
Blah.
Why do you bother with this stuff? I think it's important, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, so, and again, like, I feel like people ask me constantly, people in my life who are close to me, and like other people who I know as well who are in the same, in American culture studies or whatever, but So there's this quote from Ray Brown that I have on this slide. It's from a conversation from 2002 with a journal called Americana. But he says, for a civilization to flourish and continue, it is important that all aspects be known because up until recently they were recognized as inseparable. Increasingly, our culture is coming to realize that the proper study of a democratic society is its democratic cultures and practices all. Some may be more desirable and respectable, but as Lincoln might have said, some cultures are desirable to some of the people some of the time, and as such they are valuable as evidence of that segment of society. This evidence is clearly visible now in the interest we are seeing among archaeologists who are digging around in tombs of the dead, not looking for gold, but for everyday artifacts. So I think of a lot of people have said that Ray Brown kind of had the mentality of one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I think about the, just the importance of studying everyday things and what that could tell us about life during that time. Like, for example, like by studying a diary, like the Diary of Anne Frank, we know about her experience during World War II, right? And so I think that there is a lot of significance in studying just daily kind of ephemera. And Ray Brown is, not just some random person, but he is the forefather considered by, I would say, most people in the field, that he's the forefather of American popular culture studies, and he's known internationally and among scholars for his contributions. He's the founding editor of the Journal of Popular Culture, the Journal of American Culture, and the Popular Press, as well as the Popular Culture Association in 1969, and the American Culture Association. I think it was in the mid-60s, it might have been 1967, he came to be a professor at Bowling Green State University in the English department, specifically for folklore. But after a few years, in 1972, he established the Center for the Study of Popular Culture and the Department of Popular Culture Studies, which was the first of its kind in the United States. The foundation that Brown established in his center and in the department led to the founding of the Ray and Pat Brown Library for Popular Culture Studies, which still exists today in Bowling Green, as well as the Music Library and Bill Shirk's Sound Archives. Today, the Department of Popular Culture is housed in the School of Cultural and Critical Studies at Bowling Green State University, but it's still going strong, and students can get bachelor's degrees there in American Culture Studies, Popular Culture, Ethnic Studies, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, as well as PhDs and Masters of Arts in American Culture Studies, and an MA in Popular Culture. But people from the program have gone on to do so many different things. Like I have a friend who's teaching in New York in the digital humanities. There's other friends who have moved abroad. One of them is in India, doing work there at a university. I think that there's a lot of opportunities because there's a lot of different areas to be explored within popular culture and within American culture. So the Brown Pop Culture Library at BGSU, I did want to share some of its collection's strengths. So these are directly from their website, which is linked here. They also have a wonderful Instagram account if you use Instagram. It's their Pop Culture Lib. They do a lot of great giveaways. They hold regular events. They also offer students, faculty, and staff and community members a unique space for working or studying, as well as hosting a summer research institute, which is going on right now, actually. But for the Summer Research Institute, anyone can apply, and it's for like a select group of researchers from across the country and abroad, and they're given the opportunity to work directly with what the university calls the most comprehensive popular culture archive of its kind in the United States. but yeah, so these are some of the things in their collection. I don't know specifics of how many of these things they have. I tried to do a little investigating. I could not find it though. So these numbers that are listed here are kind of vague, but for popular fiction, they have a really large romance novel collection, as well as a collection of romance novel covers, romance comics, and then a lot of mystery, detective series, science fiction and fantasy, westerns, entertainment. They have a ton of movies, as well as like movie scripts or other kind of materials related to filming, which is quite cool. And then as far as comics, they have, graphic novels, they have book covers, they have, like it says here, cards, posters. I'll talk a little bit about what I researched in the library on the next slide.
Mhm.
But they also have a huge collection of magazines, cookbooks. They have collections of like random things that you wouldn't even really think about, but like J.C. Penney catalogs
That's
and
crazy.
and cookie cutters. They have like a huge cookie cutter collection. So
Wow.
I feel like if you need to find something, or if you're interested or curious, like just go to the library and see what they can do. A lot of the times they have something.
It's a super, super cool library. I have physically been there, and you have to go up the elevator, and you get and a lot of the stuff is in closed archives, right? Because it's so delicate. In many cases, the comic books especially.
Yes. So all of their stuff is basically kept kind of archived, and what you do is you can go there in person, and you can work with the person at the front desk to kind of take out or borrow whatever you are looking for there. Usually, I would say I'm pretty positive that all of the stuff you have to look at on site. You can go to their website to make requests as well, and it's pretty like
Do you
easily.
guys see any VHS tapes? I've got about 5 boxes of them.
Oh yeah, I mean they definitely have, probably, I'm sure, so many.
They probably do.
Tapes. And it's funny you say that, because I'm trying to turn my like home office into a little kind of nostalgia room, and I definitely just bought like a VHS copy of Spice World.
Nice. That's a classic.
Yes, but they have, yeah, they're wonderful to work with, and it's very easy like to use their website to just request something there. They can also potentially get something from other websites, or let you know where you can find those things. I know the Ohio State University has they have like a very extensive comic collection too in the Billy Ireland Cartoon Museum. So they're extremely helpful, and I'll go to the next slide so I can talk a little bit about that. But when I went there for my research, I told them a little bit about what my dissertation was, which I will talk about that too. I realized I put these slides in a weird order, but
I'm so delighted by this art. I'm so delighted by the gay comics header. He's going to town on that glizzy.
Yeah. Yes. So that's such a strange word to me. I like, if anything makes me feel old, it's like certain new slang, and I'm like, glizzy, why? It's a hot dog. Yeah. Anyway, I'm old. So there was, I don't remember what summer it was, but I believe it was the summer before I did my prelim examinations, which you have to do in your like third year. But I went to the pop culture library and just went to the front desk and kind of told them what I was looking for. I was like, I'm looking for like this series called Gay Comics. It's an underground comic series. And the student employee working at the front desk was like, oh yeah, we have those, after a quick little search on the computer. And I have to specifically shout out Dana Namath, who is the library's reference archivist. She pulled the entire series that they had for me. And then also, after hearing about my dissertation a bit, she pulled like everything else she could find on like the history of queer comics, any books that they had that were there that she thought could be relevant. So So she was wonderful and so helpful. So they had this collection there, which I just kind of, during my lunch hours would go over to the library. If you are researching something extensively, they will create a cart for you. So you can just, you could leave and come back as many days as you want to, and they'll get your cart for you, which is what they did for me.
Nice.
And they just set it up with all of these things. And then if I had more questions, I would ask, and they would be able to share some things with me. But, I did, like it says here on the slide, I did a ton of theoretical and like socio-cultural research, but this was the aspect of my research that was probably the most fun part, because I got to read comics and figure out how to kind of connect them either to my work or how they were going to be helpful to me. And in this situation, it was more, I just wanted like an overview. I wanted to kind of see queerness in comics, because that's what I'm writing about a bit. But also, I wanted to know what was out there. So these two examples, the first two images are called Scrapbook Andy and I by Jim Yost, or Yost, I'm not positive. But it's in issue 4 of Gay Comics from November of 1983. And I just really loved the artwork. I loved the layout of the pages. I loved just the use of black and white here and the emotion in it. And I knew, like, part of my research and looking at these comics was also figuring out how I was going to lay out my dissertation, because I am doing it as a comic. So, like, what is the history that I'm building onto? What are the references that I'm drawing from? That's part of what I was doing this research about too. So the third image is from a comic called Bye Bye. Like, you could kind of see it in the slide, but like BYE-BI.
Oh.
But yeah, by Ivan Velez Jr. And that is also just a really, I just found that story to be really beautiful. It was about a man who kind of comes to realize, what his sexuality is and how he was kind of suppressing it throughout his life. And, part of my comic, or part of my dissertation, the first chapter kind of deals with the concept of like gay panic. And so that's like one of the facets that I touch on. But the pop culture library was extremely helpful to me at this stage of my research. And I also would love to just shout out Tyne Lowe is their manuscripts archivist, and she has a background and interest in alternative comics, newspaper comics, and also zines. And so she was extremely helpful during this time too. And when I worked, I was a graduate assistant in the Center for Women and Gender Equity at the time. We partnered with Tyne and the Pop Culture Library on some events. And so that was really fun too, to kind of look through their collection and kind of create some displays with her, which is also great. If anyone has the chance to visit the Pop Culture Library, they create these wonderful displays every month. They had one on gaming recently, actually.
Oh, cool.
And so they had they had a ton of gaming systems from throughout history, different games,
Love
some
that.
magazines related to gaming. Yeah, it was super cool. A bunch of Pokemon stuff. But yeah, they do a lot of awesome displays. So if anyone is ever in that area, highly recommend visiting. And then I also would just love to shout out Sasha Kim, who is their head librarian. She's been in the position for a year now. And she also is she's just a strong advocate for popular culture in general, but she has her special focus areas are like webtoons, manga, manhwa, as well as like queer representation in popular culture. So I just feel that everyone who works in the library they're just all wonderful.
I'd love to do
But
a manga talk at some point too. Can I ask a couple questions about the pictures on the slide here real quick?
yeah, please do.
So these are from underground comics. Sometimes they spell that comics with an X, yeah. And I think it ties really well into the Ninja Turtles talk that I did 2 weeks ago, because Ninja Turtles was also an underground comics before
Ah,
it became a pop culture phenomenon, as it were. And I think it's contemporary to these, more or less. You said this was 1983?
yeah, so the Ninja Turtle comics, I believe, were contemporary. These kept I know that this series kept the X in the title
Mm-hmm.
until I believe about issue 15, and then they switched to like their traditional spelling of comics, because I believe at that point, I think they might have been. I don't think they. I'm trying to think if they switched publishers. I can't remember off the top of my head, um, but yeah, they would have been contemporary.
Yeah, so it's the so it's the early '80s when when these were being created. That's really cool. What could you say to like the comics with an X scene at the time? Like, how were these getting distributed? How did people find these?
Yeah, so I mean, this comic in particular was through Kitchen Sink, which was a small like publisher. Um, but I would say that a lot of these were being distributed in a similar way that that zines were being distributed in like the punk movement of like the late 70s and then early to mid 80s. These were being distributed like locally, but then also through small presses like Kitchen Sink. And there were a number of creators who were were publishing and putting out, like, just creating this stuff for these smaller just smaller places. So for example, Lee Mars was big in like early, like specifically she was one of the women who worked on women's comics. Women spelled, I believe it's spelled Wimmen.
Oh.
But Lee Mars and Trina Robbins wrote a lot of like underground women's comics, but Lee Mars, her comics had like a lot of queer characters, specifically lesbian characters in it. So women's comics was like on the kind of underground as well. A little earlier, but also simultaneously as gay comics. And then you also had like Alison Bechdel, a little bit later with the Dykes to Watch Out For.
The infamous Bechdel test comes from them.
Yes, so yes, the Bechdel test comes from those comics. And so yeah, I would say a lot of small publishers, a lot of like zines, people creating like different fan accounts. And a little bit later in my slide, I talk about some other kind of underground queer comics as well. But I would say that from the earliest time of like American comics, these kind of queer comics existed at the margins. Any other questions, or should I move to the next slide?
Next slide would be good, unless there's questions from the chat. I think the chat is very, very patiently listening right now.
Oh, okay, awesome. Feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to
Yeah, feel
talk.
free to pipe up if you're out there and if you have questions, just drop them in the chat and we'll get to them. No problem. Okay,
so yeah, good timing. So I said, like, from the beginning of American comics, queerness existed outside of the mainstream. So Tijuana Bibles were a thing in the 1930s. So this would be kind of the golden age of comics, right? And those were small 8-page books, kind of like the ones that you might make in, like, I don't know, a class if you were making like a tiny booklet or something with like a 1-page, one sheet that you just kind of cut up and fold into 8. But they were sold illegally, and they depicted like famous people or famous characters engaging in explicit sexual situations. So these were not typically original characters. There was a lot of like, stuff with like Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and other
Zooks,
like
they can't do that.
Yeah, right. Some comic strip characters from the time. So these were being sold. And then in mainstream comics, there was also a lot of, like I say here, they loved stories featuring cross-dressing and gender swapping. So I believe, I don't know if it's this comic that's pictured here that I write about in my notes, but I don't believe it is. But there was one particular strip called Terry and the Pirates by Milton Caniff. And it featured a cross-dressing villainous French woman named Saint-Jacques. It was pretty heavily implied that she was interested in the protagonist's girlfriend named April. And then, though the strip began running in 1934, Saint-Jacques didn't show up until the strip published on February 12th, 1939. And she was widely considered the first lesbian in comics, though it was never blatantly stated.
1939. That's wild. That's so long ago.
Yes, yeah. This comic that is on the slide, so I do have something about it actually. So this is from 1940, and it's from Crack Comics #1, but it introduces a crime-fighting character named Madame Fatale, or Madame Fatal, I guess. And her alter ego was a man named Richard Stranton. So there were a lot of comics that featured stories of cross-dressing, and I think we see it a lot too in our popular culture up until probably into the 2000s. Like in the 90s we had Mrs. Doubtfire.
I was just thinking Mrs. Doubtfire. It's the little old lady disguise.
Yeah, we had Martin Lawrence doing Big Mama's House, and on his TV show Martin, he had his neighbor that he also played. I think her name was Shanae, I want to say. What?
White Chicks.
Oh yeah, White Chicks as well. Yeah, the Wayans brothers. So I feel like, specifically when it's men cross-dressing as women, we see that a lot in popular culture, and it's often played for laughs. And that's a tangent in another conversation, because when it's played the other way, it's usually not played for laughs or comedy. But yeah, I won't go down that road for now. But so yeah, during this time we had a lot of cross-dressing and gender swapping, and then moving into like later in the 1900s, like specifically the 70s and 80s. I talked about some of this already, but we had creators like Lee Mars, Trina Robbins, Alison Bechdel with the Women's Comics Collective. Another Robert Triptow was another creator involved in like the queer-focused / like queer-forward works in the comics underground. And then Howard Cruz, who was the original publisher of the gay comics. He was very much like one of the bigger figures in like the queer underground. But these stories have been around forever, in the same way that you can find evidence of queerness in various artifacts from history. Or I just read a few weeks ago for the first time, actually, which is wild, but I read James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room, and that came out in 1956 and is about a man who is struggling with his love for another man as he's engaged to this woman, and it's really progressive for the time. We also saw I think it was in the 1940s, it might have been the early 50s, but the like first prominent like trans women in American media. Christine Jorgensen, I believe her last name was, but she went to Europe to have gender affirming surgery, came back, and was kind of like a media sensation in America, like the exact opposite of what you would expect the like public's reaction to be today.
I think this is true, and I think it's a way in which we've regressed slightly, because I seem to remember seeing some headlines at the time, and they were like, "Yeah, Zooks, a sex change. Wow, this is really cool that science can do this." And now we're like, "No, science can't do that. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, and I think she became like I think she like had some acting parts afterwards too, and did a ton of press, and like was very much like this media darling. And so I think like I said, like queerness has been around forever. Our relationship to queerness has changed.
This is a total
Which
tangent, but have you ever seen the film Glenn or Glenda?
I have not.
That's Ed Wood's movie about cross-dressing. Really interesting film. Really interesting film. At some point, I'm gonna do a viewing of it, because it's a really strange. They tried to make it like expletive, but at the same time, it's like kind of heartfelt because it's autobiographical. Because Ed Wood was a cross-dresser. Interesting movie. Really, really strange film.
I will have to add it to my list because you said that, and immediately I thought of like the Chucky franchise, and which I love, and like his children are named Glenn and Glenda, right? So
that's because that's Ed Wood's movie.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. I did include some further reading here. I will say some of this information came from both of these places, but if you would like to explore some like more in-depth discussions, definitely both of these sources are great for that. Also, I did not include it here, but there is a documentary that came out in the past few years, and also a book called No Straight Lines, and it explores 4 decades of queer comics. And I was just able to get a copy of it recently, and I'm so excited. It was a gift, but a lot of the authors or creators who I mentioned are featured in it. So there's
cool.
So Alison Bechdel, Lee Mars, Trina Robbins, Ivan Velez Jr., Howard Cruz. But it's a really wonderful history of just queer comics, and it goes into a bit to just kind of like the underground aspect of it.
And since we can't click those links on stream, we will add those to the description of the YouTube video when I upload this to YouTube to make sure people know where to get this information if they want it.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I should have thought of that. I'm sorry.
No, totally fine. But those are the titles, right? So we'll make sure to get that info out to everybody who's watching today, or we'll also post it in the Discord later.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next slide does focus on my dissertation. So I mentioned that I was writing about queerness and that I was doing it as a comic. So my dissertation is called Extraordinary Bodies, Queerness, Disability, and Possibility in Marvel's X-Men. I'm examining the shifting perspectives of queerness as illness in American culture through my lived perspective and through a close reading of select X-Men comics from the 1980s to today. So I'm taking as far as like the theoretical approach, I'm looking at it from a feminist queer crip lens. And I'm reading chapter 1 focuses on Iceman, which I've published on him previously, but there were things that I wanted to explore more that I didn't get to in that chapter. So it's looking at some comics from the early 2000s and my experience kind of discovering comics. And so these first 2 pictures here, these first 2 pages, I should say, they talk a little bit about like how I got into comics, I guess, but it was a trip to Universal Studios. I got a bunch of X-Men and Uncanny X-Men collections written by Chris Claremont. And then at the same time, I had discovered a local comic store that was near my aunt's work. And so every Saturday we would go there and I would get kind of the ones that were being published at the time. So Generation X, X-Force, which had just shifted to a new team. It was before they were rebranded X-Statix, but it was that team. And then comics like New X-Men by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. And then Uncanny X-Men at that time, there were stories by Chuck Austin, which are the ones that I kind of talk about in that first chapter. But so the first chapter really explores just kind of me discovering comics, but also that concept of gay panic and like, reading the comics, recognizing myself in some of the characters, kind of reconciling why I was feeling that way and what society was saying at the time about queerness. and I talk about in the first chapter how there were a lot of leaps that were made forward for queer progress, but also a lot of, what is it? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, a lot of things that were also kind of inhibiting that progress. I'm just kind of scrolling through my first chapter right now to see if I could give specific examples so that I'm not just saying things.
Do you have further slides on the X-Men, or can I ask you X-Men questions? Should I ask them on this slide, or should I ask them on a later slide?
I do have more on the X-Men. So
I want to dig into that X-Men a little bit, because there's a lot of topics you can talk about with the X-Men, how they stand in for various cultures.
Yes. So yes, there's more on the X-Men, and we could talk more about that. But yeah, so this is what my comic is, or my dissertation is. The second chapter is more about the relationship between Richter and Shatterstar. So looking at kind of heterosexual fear, I suppose. And then the third chapter, which I'm drawing right now, but is written, is all about which queer bodies are used in society to kind of show like, oh, hey, look, we're great, we're progressive, and which ones are deemed like threats. And then the fourth chapter kind of deals more with like collective and coalition and blah blah blah. But that's the dissertation that I'm working on, and these are just some random pages from chapters 1 and 2 that I was like,
Little Mermaid art. I'm such a Little Mermaid fan.
Yeah, so I talk in the dissertation a bit about the idea that, there wasn't a lot of queer representation, and so that's why a lot of queer individuals have to kind of put themselves into stories. And there's a great quote by, I don't remember who, but I will find out. But they talk about like the latchkey kid associations of how we have to kind of make our own connections and form our own identities from what is popular. And so, I talk about, as a child, recognizing myself in like stories like The Little Mermaid, and how, that one page with the street sharks where it says it's a boy, like there were all these, I was surrounded by all these boy things. I have 2 older brothers. And when I say boy things, I've, heavy air quotes, like what does that mean?
Right.
But, I feel like,
as a kid, you walk into the toy store and there's 2 aisles. There's a blue aisle and a pink aisle. And they started that pretty, that was something that I pretty much saw my whole life. I don't remember a time before there was, when they had toy stores, they had the toys in one aisle or the other. And as somebody who was like interested in toys from both sides of the aisle, I mean, I'm not non-binary. Like, I identify she, her pronouns, but I still had this slight bit of like, I don't want to call it like gender confusion, but like, what if I want boys' toys? Is that okay? I want Nintendo, which they put on the boys' side. I want Transformers, which they put on the boys' side. May I not have both because of who I am? It always seems strange to me.
I mean, it's drilled into us from when we're still in the womb, right? Especially, I mean, now, especially like gender reveals are so popular.
It's gotten worse. It's gotten crazier.
It's worse, and it's causing, like forest fires, and but yeah, from the moment we're born, we're put into a certain category depending on, our assigned sex, and then we're kind of stuck in that category depending on, just, I guess, how we're raised and how we're nurtured. And yeah, it can seem it's confusing, and it seems kind of scary, like, oh, we can't go into that other aisle, or if you did get a Transformer, it had to be like a pink one, or so my dissertation deals like a lot with that as well. And there's a page there that's the one with like a bunch of the black rectangles that kind of talks about some of those moments where gender was being kind of drilled into me. And I remember as a child, this woman asked me, a stranger, just kind of, I don't remember what the setting was, but she asked me what my favorite color was. And I said, well, boys like blue and girls like pink. And I don't like that, so I like green. And she was like, what are you, a hermaphrodite? And like to say
What?
to say that to someone you
That's
don't
so
know who's,
crazy to a kid.
four, like
Oh my
yeah,
god,
yeah.
what?
So
You're allowed to like
so
whatever color you are.
exactly. And so my dissertation talks about that too, like kind of my my relationship to blue and like coming back to it as like a comforting color, a nostalgic color, a color that kind of allows me to, I don't know, feel melancholy but also like contentment. So yeah, anyway, just some random dissertation pages. And I did want to include that so many scholars have written about gender and sexuality in comics and identity. I mentioned Frederick Louis Aldama. He's such an amazing scholar, really someone who holds the door open for emerging voices and elevates and uplifts like new and emerging scholars, especially marginalized scholars. Just such a wonderful human and with great works. Joseph J. Dorowski has written about X-Men in regards to race and gender. Ramsey Fawaz has written about mutants, X-Men, but also other superheroes when it comes to gender, race, and identity in American comics. Esther Dadaw, Sam Langsdale just came out with a great book at the end of 2024, searching for feminist superheroes, gender, sexuality, and race in Marvel Comics. Her book just won an award at the Comic Studies Conference. It won the book award, and she is the outgoing president of the Comic Studies Society. She's amazing. Definitely encourage everyone to pick up that book. And Anna F. Peppard, Super Sex, Sexuality, Fantasy, and the Superhero. Anna is a great scholar, has some wonderful podcasts and also websites on comics. I think the thing that I also love about comic studies as a field is that a lot of it is so accessible. Like people are writing in a way and delivering their work in a way that is not just for, people behind like the giant brick walls of academia. Like it's very much, I feel like they are writing for everyone, and I love that. Yeah, so many people have written on this topic. I did want to emphasize that, and I also want to emphasize that there are reasons that queer and marginalized individuals see themselves in these comics, but also that, a reason why people are writing about them. So, characters are ostracized for their identities or their abilities. They're struggling with their differences, or they're struggling to hide their differences. And then there's a lot of found family narratives in comics as well, like in X-Men or Fantastic Four, although I guess technically 3 of them are family, but, I had to include this image from the second X-Men movie, X-Men 2. They go to Iceman, Bobby Drake's parents' house, and his parents find out he's a mutant, and his mom says, "Have you tried not being a mutant?" Which, was just really funny. And, Bryan Singer, obviously a terrible person. We know about the things that he has done with a number of young men. But he was cognizant of the fact that X-Men, that a lot of queer people see themselves in those stories, and so he incorporated that into that film. But yeah, so it makes sense that these kinds of themes would be prevalent in these titles, like, Fantastic Four in 1961, Spider-Man 1962, X-Men 1963. In the early 1960s, the United States was at like an intersection of change, right? The civil rights movement was in full swing, and that spurred the second wave of feminism, as well as the disability rights movement drew a lot from the women's movement and the civil rights movement. If you haven't read Judith Heumann's memoir, she goes into that a lot, and it's a great read. But also the queer rights movement later in that decade was occurring. So it's natural that these comics would would, reflect what was going on in the culture, which I think is another reason why pop culture studies is important, because popular culture reflects what is happening at the time, right? So by looking at these stories, we can have a better idea of what is going on in the culture at large. And, Marvel, and Stan Lee in particular, wasn't shy either in addressing the issues of the day in his monthly column, Stan's Soapbox. So these soapboxes appeared in the backs of comics in the 60s and the 70s. I won't read these to you because they're long, and you probably have seen them online. I feel like they were shared a lot at the time of Stan Lee's death. But, in the first one, he's talking about bigotry and racism and how there's no place for it. In the second one, he's talking about moralizing, and he says there's as much discussion of war and peace, civil rights, and the so-called youth rebellion as there is of our Marvel mags. None of us live in a vacuum, which is true, right? None of us have. I think that's something that I've said to students in the past too. Like, none of us have single identities, right? We all have multifaceted identities that inform our perspective, and so we can't ignore these different things going on. That third one,
You mean to tell me that comics are political and comics had politics in them?
Right?
I thought comics didn't have politics, and that only new comics had politics, and old comics didn't have politics.
Right? I mean, like, get out of here with that hashtag super woke movie.
Just double checking.
The conversation around the Superman movie right now is it's fascinating to watch and not surprising. But yeah, anyway, comics have always been political in the same way that, like, our lives are political. Like, everything is the personal is political, right? I don't remember who said that either. I apologize. I have a terrible memory, but someone smart said that. But yeah, and then in his third column, I did highlight some parts that I wanted to read in this one, but he says, from where I sit, bigotry is one of the many stains upon the human escutcheon, which must be eradicated before we can truthfully call ourselves civilized. There are good people and bad people and all categories in between, and you'll find them amongst all races, all religions, all sizes, shapes, and sexes. You want to dislike someone, be my guest. It's a free country, but do it because he or she has personally given you a reason to feel that way, not because of skin color or religion or foreign ancestry or any other moronic, mixed-up, mindless motive. Because if you justify your hatred by smearing everyone in any given group with the same brush, you're a bigot, Charlie. And I think he was actually addressing a fan and not just saying some random name. But yeah, the people
Charlie in 1978.
Yes. But the people who were, creating these comics too, like the people who created Superman, who created Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, who created a bunch of the Marvel characters, they dealt with this in their lives too. I think, if I'm right, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were both Jewish with immigrant parents, as were the creators of Superman, and they knew what it was to be discriminated against. And yeah, so the fact that people would think that these characters are anything but political is surprising, or, well, just, I don't know. But I think the next slide talks about, so the reason that we don't see a lot of explicit representation in comics, like in the mid 20th century, is because of the Comics Code Authority. And this is my little Bryan who describes what that is. But the Comics Code was created in 1954 in response to the book Seduction of the Innocent by psychiatrist Frederick Wortham. He was attacking, more specifically, horror comics and romance comics, but also superhero comics, specifically like the relationship of Batman and Robin. But, for allegedly containing subversive messages encouraging crime, violence, loose sexual morals, anarchy, homosexuality, confusion of gender roles, and talking about how all of these things could corrupt American children, which, is not the case.
It's the same stuff you hear from people today, if I'm going to be honest with you. Like, oh, they Tumblr or whatever's making the kids confused about their gender. But this was when 1954 that he wrote this?
Yes. Well, that's when the comics code was created. I think he might have written it maybe a year or two before that. But also, yeah, I mean, every time there's a mass shooting, I feel like it's a conversation that doesn't come, it doesn't go to guns. It goes to like, oh, well, this person was playing these violent video games,
Right. Right.
Which, yeah, it's. I think that a lot of times popular media is used as the scapegoat to avoid addressing like the real issues.
Oh, yeah, we're about to hit ads, by the way. We do get a Twitch ad break. It'll be a 3-minute if you're not subbed. But I did get a really good question or comment from chat. It's similar to the ESRB. So how familiar are you with the history of the ESRB?
I do not know what that is.
Oh, okay, so that is the Entertainment Software Ratings Board. That is the board that rates video games. So there is a similarity there between the Comics Code Authority approving a comic for sale to children and the E for Everyone banner that you might see on a video game approving a video game to sale for children. But I think the difference here is that they did not have, like, it was either approved by the Comics Code Authority or it wasn't approved by the Comics Code Authority, right? It's a binary, black and white thing.
Yes, and there are instances throughout like the time that specifically like the big two publishers, Marvel and DC, there are instances when they did kind of publish without the approval of the code for a specific comic, but it was rare. I know there was one Spider-Man comic that dealt with alcoholism, I believe. I want to say in the 70s, maybe.
Well,
but
Iron Man did a lot of that, right? Iron Man did a lot of that.
Yes, Iron Man also struggled with alcoholism. But also the difference is that the I actually don't know about the ESRB if it still exists, right? It's the
it's the thing that they all use. Yeah. They have to use it. No, in the US, in Europe, it's PEGI. It's a different.
Okay, so at this point, the Comics Code has like kind of gone away. Like Marvel stopped using it, I think in 2000 or 2001. I have it written down somewhere in my dissertation. And then I believe DC stopped around the same time, maybe in the late 90s, because I know that they had the comic The Authority that came out in, I believe, 1998. But yeah, so once they stopped submitting to it, then things got a little looser with like the stories they were telling. And by looser, I should say more inclusive. Mm-hmm. Sorry, is that ad break going to happen?
The ad break is actually happening right now, so we're in 2-minute ads. That's what happens with Twitch. It just kind of drops them on me. I'm just gonna go ahead and talk through though, because we're gonna keep all of this recorded on the YouTube video when it gets uploaded. But I will continue to ask you questions about this slide. The Comics Code Authority, they started in 1954 and ended in around 2000. And what was the impetus for them deciding to ditch it? Was it they just decided they didn't need it anymore? Why did they decide to get rid of this?
So I think it came down to like our changing culture and what was being discussed like more widely. In the 80s we had the AIDS epidemic, and like going into the 90s, and the comics like touched on that in different ways, which like the X-Men had their legacy virus, but I think more and more queer people were becoming more visible. We started to see more representation in other places, like in TV and movies, for marginalized individuals, not just queer people, but people of like just everyone who is marginalized. And so I think the optimist in me wants to say that it was so that they could tell stories more authentically, but the pessimist in me wants to say that it's because of money, and they probably felt like they could make more money by ditching the Comics Code approval, which is sad, but I feel probably true.
Do you think that the lack, I mean, not that there was not depiction of diversity in those comics that were under the Comics Code, because there absolutely was, but do you think that they would have pushed it harder if not for the Comics Code Authority?
I want to say yes, because and I think I talk about this a little bit on the X-Men slide too, but there were creators who had intentions of, for example, like making characters explicitly queer, or they portrayed them as queer without actually saying they were queer. And I think if the code did not exist, they would have just been able to tell those stories more openly.
One of the things that fascinates me about the code, and we're back from ads, by the way, so thank you guys for waiting the 3-minute ad break if you were watching ads. One of the things that fascinates me about the code is that it also specifies that, like, crime should not go unpunished and that kind of thing, right? Like, you're not allowed to get away with doing evil, and the good guys always have to win. And I see shades of this in many puritanical posters today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's interesting because it's like I pick up a comic, and that's not the story that I'm getting from it. Like, I'm not taking away, oh, the heroes didn't win. I'm taking away that, the fact that they fought and that they persist. And I'm never, rooting for the villain in most cases. Like, it depends on what the story is, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like, as far as like encouraging crime or encouraging violence or anarchy, I feel like in most specifically superhero stories, that's not what is happening.
The classic horror movie trope is at the end of the horror movie, they sort of set up a sequel, right? Like, whatever the bad guy is gets away, or they wake up at the end and they're like, oh, they're still alive, and then they cut to credits. And, like, in horror comics, they would probably also use similar tropes where they would, like, leave it on a cliffhanger. And I guess you weren't allowed to do that under the Authority? Is that right? Is that what they mean?
So I feel like when it comes to horror comics, it was probably more a thing of, like, the violence in them, if it was, like, gory,
right,
really scary. But I'm not entirely sure, because that's not, like, my area of expertise. Although I feel like there's been this I've seen this awesome, like, collection of early Creepshow comics at my local comic book store, and it's been on sale for like 2 months now, and I'm like, I need to buy it before someone else does.
We do get that with horror video games. Like, oh no, they're too gory, they're too violent.
Yeah, so I would imagine that's what it was for horror, but I'm not entirely certain.
That makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So the next slide is all about representation in mainstream comics and how it's complicated and messy. So it's complicated and messy because of the Comics Code Authority and just, how long it was in place. A lot of comics, I would say, and this is not necessarily because of the Comics Code being lifted or being gotten rid of, but also just because comic stories have been, like X-Men has been in the cultural, like, zeitgeist since 1963, right? So it's been, I can't do math, 65 years, maybe, ish. But, so a lot of these stories have been around for over 50 years, and there's going to be retroactive continuity, so retconning, and we see it in other stories too. I mean, the same is true for, like, soap operas. When a soap opera has been on the air for decades, there's going to be characters who come back, or characters who were not really dead, or characters who have a different love interest now, and I think it's a lot of times representative of, like I said, like, reflective of our culture, but also in certain cases, it has to do with like the creator's intentions.
Mhm.
And like in my chapter on Richter and Shatterstar, they are the third picture, and to the right. But when they kissed in this comic, in this X Factor comic, in 2000, I want to say 9, it might have been 2008, but it was a big deal for a lot of fans because a lot of fans read into those two characters as being queer, and those characters were not intended as queer from the people who were initially writing them, like Rob Liefeld, or the people who were drawing them, like Fabian Nicieza.
Oh, you have that backwards. Fabian was the writer on X-Force and Rob was the artist.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm so sorry. Yes, no, thank you for correcting me.
This is my area of special interest.
Yes. And I know that the writer who came after Nicieza was like, he was like, oh no, they're totally queer and I'm going to write them that way. And so but without explicitly saying it. And so, the queer people who are reading this comic and reading them as queer, like, were understanding that writer's intentions. And, that writer was interpreting Nicieza and Liefeld's work as like, oh, these two are queer. And so I think when it comes to retconning, it gets messy because, you have like fan expectations, you have the intentions of the creators and the artists, and then you also have like I would say, like shock value or selling factors. I do. Go ahead.
I had to look it up. Shatterstar New Mutants '99 was his debut.
Yes, so he debuted in New Mutants and then jumped over to X-Force. And it was in X-Force where he met and was interacting with Richter. I think Richter officially joined the team in like either issue 12 or 14. But yes. Let's see. I'm just kind of going through my notes a little bit too. So, okay, yeah. So another example of just kind of like the messiness of queer representation in mainstream comics. North Star, the character who was part of Alpha Flight and the X-Men, he debuted in the comics in 1979, but he didn't officially come out until 1992 in Alpha Flight 106. But during that time, like, people read into him as being queer, but he was not actually queer. And then in that time, there were other characters who were introduced and who existed who were queer coded as well, but not specifically said to be queer. So there's kind of like, who was the first queer superhero?
Yeah, I was about to ask, was North Star the first Marvel hero to come out, or was there earlier?
So North Star is typically the one who is considered like the first hero for Marvel, at least, but DC did have a character that came out that debuted after North Star, but was like very queer, I suppose, in his appearances. So his name was Extraño, and he debuted in Millennium #2 in 1988, created by Steve Englehart and Joe Staton. And they intended for him to be an openly queer character, but
cool. That's interesting.
But he wasn't. Yes, so like he was represented as queer, but never explicitly. They never explicitly said he was queer. But North Star and Extraño are two, like, I would say, of the first examples that people often point to. And then just some info from DC's LGBT database, which is a great source as well. I feel like their website is well maintained, but it says the late 1980s and early 1990s saw the introduction of several characters that focused on the hardships and hatred of LGBT people faced, or the hatred that they faced, like Kevin Meyer in the pages of Wonder Woman, John Constantine in Swamp Thing, and Hellblazer. And then they also mentioned Coagula and Doom Patrol and Terry Berg and Green Lantern. They said that this was partly influenced by an influx of writers and artists who were queer themselves, like Rachel Pollack and Grant Morrison. And then they talk a little bit about Neil Gaiman's Sandman series as well, which featured like an elderly gay couple and some other characters. But then it says, like, nevertheless, these adult themes were mostly reserved for supporting characters and adult-oriented Vertigo comics. So I believe that those Vertigo comics, because they were focused toward adults, they did not like have to abide by the comics code. Issues would sometimes be addressed in a roundabout way, like what does this say? The example they give is I think it says Schwan, Aaron, and Rebus, which I don't know who those characters are, so I apologize. But I did just also note, like, there were some other queer characters who came out like a little bit later in the late 90s, specifically like the Midnighter and Apollo, who are also often pointed to as early queer representations, and those are DC characters who I believe they're in the Authority, but they debuted in Stormwatch. But yeah, so the representation in mainstream comics, especially in like superhero comics, I feel like it is quite messy, and there's a lot of retconning. I know people were, incensed when Iceman was introduced as queer. Same with like Kitty Pryde when she kissed her tattoo artist. People were like, "Oh my god!" But also like queer fans were like, "Yes," because like they saw Kitty as queer. Same with the fourth picture there on the bottom, Rachel Summers and Psylocke. A lot of people kind of were rooting for their romance for a while. Same with like Kitty Pryde and Magic. Like a lot of people were like, "Oh, like they're more than friends," So I think that when they do retcon characters, and when characters, when their sexualities evolve and transform, I think there are many fans who are happy that they don't have to do that, that latchkey kid thing of like inserting themselves or finding themselves in characters. Like they actually can identify with these characters in a way that doesn't feel forced, or it doesn't have to be hidden, or so I don't know, I'm always happy to see a change made in comics, because I think it's it's a space where stories can be explored, and people get angry over all kinds of representation, right? Like when there's when they introduced a Chinese Superman, people were like super upset, and it's like there can be many, like, it's okay.
I know we're gonna get comments on YouTube, probably in particular, about like some of the retcon stuff, because I know that I've seen a lot of sentiment among elder geeks, or among geeks that kind of grew up the same time I did, or in general, that like it didn't used to be this way. Why are there so many gay characters now? There didn't used to be this many gay characters. I mean, do you feel like there's an argument there that it's oversaturated, or that they're overcompensating, or like the people that say, why don't you just create new characters? Why do you have to change old characters?
Yeah, I think that I think that points can be made on both sides that are coherent and make sense. I understand the fans who are upset when like their favorite character changes. But I also think that individuals, like as people, we change throughout our lives too, right? So I think that someone who is, for example, Bobby, who is a teenager, who, in that comic, they travel to the future, he meets his adult self. And I think, as a teenager, you grow and you change, and like you are not the same person at 16 that you are at 38, hopefully. I do think also it's great when they create new characters, because I think it's nice to have different kinds of representation, and to explore new stories. But at the same time, then they complain still that like, oh, there's so many gay characters, or like, oh, I don't like this new character, or I know there was controversy with Marvel a few years ago because they created these two characters that were, I think their names were like Snowflake, and I don't remember what the other one's name was, but I think they were siblings.
The other one was called Safe Space.
Yes, Yes. And so, like, you can say create new characters, but then when you create characters like that, it feels like a slap in the face to queer people who are like, okay. And then, I feel like
Sometimes
I
they're
feel like
amusing.
it, yeah, yeah. And then, like, I think that also just angers, like, conservatives or far right people further, because it's like, oh, these characters are terrible and blah blah
All
blah.
characters should just be Snowflake. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do think that um, all characters are snowflake. That's great. Sorry, I just read that. I I do, yeah. So I can see validity in both arguments if they're made well. I I
It's a challenging thing to unpack, right? Because if we're
yeah,
looking at like what you've said about the Comics Code Authority, they could have made many more out characters, but the Comics Code Authority did not allow for that until they abandoned that.
yes, exactly. And I think it's also, who is the audience that they are targeting with these specific characters. Like, is it the elder fans like me or even older who are like, oh, I grew up with these characters and this isn't what they're like? Or are they writing these stories for, like younger fans who might be discovering comics or who are still kind of discovering themselves? So I don't know. I think I also think it's a space, like I said, that is it's vast, and there can be many things can exist at once.
One of the
So
things
yeah,
that I always find interesting is like those old Chris Claremont X-Men that you talked about as being like your introduction to comics. They were very much like forced diversity for the time, right? Like,
oh, 1000%, yes.
like we wouldn't
I
have
mean,
had
it was,
characters like Storm, for example, unless they made a concentrated effort to add diversity to the books.
yeah, and to think of how, it would be interesting to look into, like, how did fans who were, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, how did they react to that new iteration of X-Men that was basically like, like Captain Planet, where there was someone from like all across the world, right? And like, how was Storm received at first? And, looking at how, like, now she's probably one of their, I would say,
Right.
top 10 popular
Yeah.
characters.
Very
Like,
popular character.
yeah, so I think part of the thing with like representation and storytelling too is that, like, the stories need to be given time to breathe. So it helps that Chris Claremont also wrote like some of the most like iconic storylines in X-Men. So yeah. Um Anyway, representation is messy. Comics are messy. Fandom is messy. Um, I will say that, like, the change of representation, though, it's representative of our culture too. Like, just two of the examples that I gave here are, talking about how DC, they ran AIDS and HIV awareness ads in their early to mid '90s comics, coinciding with a more open national dialogue about the issue. And Astonishing X-Men 51 in 2012. That was this issue where North Star gets married, and that was released 11 months after New York legalized marriage equality. By that point, a number of states had legalized it, but it wasn't like legalized at the federal level until 2015. But I think comics, like a lot of other pop culture materials, they respond to our culture and what is happening. They respond to current events and they reflect current events. And so the representation that we're seeing in comics now, I think it's pretty representative of just our world in general. Sorry, now I'm just trying
Great
to
comment
read
in the chat. Thank you.
Constantine and Death talking about condoms. Yes. So that was one of the examples that I saw as well. There's another one with Green Lantern. They had like a ton of their characters just featured in these ads, and they were interesting to see.
John Constantine, famously bisexual playa, am I right?
Yes, and I will say that Constantine. So I know that of him. I will say that Constantine is like a blank spot in my comics knowledge, but comics that I want to read. And I heard that the series, like the TV series, was pretty good too, but it was canceled. But I don't know.
We've got a I don't know if they're in chat today, but there's some folks in the community that are much more versed in DC than I am. I'm way more of a Marvel as well, so if it's a Marvel in the 90s, I probably can talk about it, but the DC stuff is also more of a blind spot for me, so I just know a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like I know what I like when it comes to like various DC things, but I definitely know more about Marvel. But there's like so many DC like comics and stories that are on my like to read list. But
I've still got Animal Man over here. Keep meaning to read it.
Animal Man, yes. I have heard good things about Animal Man. I have a friend who's obsessed with Booster Gold. I don't I don't understand it, but I've also only experienced him in the Harley Quinn TV series, so
great show.
I'm curious. It is a great show, and also great representation. Let's see. So the other thing that like representation does in comics when it comes to queerness or marginalized individuals, it also shows us the ways that queer bodies are commodified, right? Like I feel like a lot of queer characters are paraded out during Pride Month for, DC Pride and for Marvel Voices, but then it's also kind of like it's interesting to see like, well, where are these characters the other 11 months of the year? Like, do they have their own solo books? Are they in ensemble stories that are actually being like supported, or are their stories being canceled? Are they just featured in miniseries? So it's interesting to kind of I think just see who is getting highlighted in these things. And I will say that I can't speak to a lot of like current comics that are coming out just because I am focused on dissertating and working and just buried under the mountain of older things that I still haven't read. But I mean, I do know that at least like, Poison Ivy has an ongoing series written by G. Willow Wilson that's awesome, that I've read the first I think 6 or 8 issues of. I did read like Son of Superman featuring John Kent that I also really enjoyed. But yeah, I would say like when it comes to Marvel stuff, I know I was really sad when they canceled the America series by Gabby Rivera. And then, she comes back in a few different ways, but I feel like it's never enough. So yeah, I think it's interesting just to look at, how when people are getting represented, how they are kind of being just,
What I'm seeing here with this picture is a pretty big demographic shift, because we're talking about like, oh, maybe I can let a character come out of the closet, perhaps, if Mr. Comics Code will let me, to, hey, everybody, here's our Pride Month catalog of characters that we want to showcase.
Yeah, and so there has been like tremendous growth from, like those early days of like when things were a little more like wink wink nudge nudge. Now there's definitely like stories that are explicitly queer, which is awesome, and like diversity among the queer characters as well when it comes to like sexuality, but also when it comes to race. And so I think it's, I don't know, it does kind of, again, like the optimist in me, it like warms my queer little heart to see these stories and to read them, and then when they're translated to like to the MCU or to like the DC TV and movie universe in some way, like that's also exciting to see. I mean, I loved like Agatha All Along when it came out, and I
Still
don't
haven't watched it. I need to watch it, but somebody in a comment on my other YouTube video got really mad that I said I hadn't watched it yet. They were like, "How dare you?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll watch
It's
it. I'll probably
great. I would
someday."
definitely encourage.
I watched the
I
first
see
half of
someone.
Ironheart though. I did catch up on Ironheart.
Yes, we don't have Disney Plus right now, so when I do get it, I need to watch Ironheart and like a bunch of other stuff. Andor, I haven't seen any of Andor yet, and like my friend is like, you have to watch it. So, um, I do see someone in the chat said Harley Quinn's ongoing series by Elliot Callan and Mindy Lee is pretty good. So I will have to add that to my list. I do love Mindy Lee and did not know that she was working on Harley Quinn, so that's
I didn't know that
exciting.
either. Thank you for the tip about that one.
I did also just hear, I think yesterday, that Dynamite Comics now has the licensing for the Buffy and the Angel series, and they are creating like some crossover comics written by Kelly Thompson, who I love, who also features various queer characters in the comics that she's written, so that's very cool. So yeah, there's definitely way more representation, not just on the page too, but like in the creative in the creative teams behind the comics. So I think in a later slide I talk about some comics creators who I love, but like Sina Grace is one who I have like followed for a long time, and I love his work, and T. Franklin, who wrote a Harley Quinn series and also wrote a comic called Bingo Love. Her work has been really cool too. So there's, I think, just more representation like behind the scenes too that is helpful, because I think when people are writing stories they know, then those stories come off as being more authentic, which, I mean, like, what does authenticity mean? That's a whole nother conversation, but I think it's helpful. And readers can see themselves more in those stories. I think it's so cool that like the actress who played I don't know the character's name, but she's there in the DC Pride. But she was in Supergirl, and she's a trans character. But she like wrote some of the comics then for that character. Same with the actress who plays Miss Marvel in the Marvel TV series. She has written some Miss Marvel comics, and I just think that's really, it's cool that these people who are embodying these characters on the screen are then going on to write them as well, because they
she just is Miss Marvel. It's incredible. Where'd they find her?
That was like perfect casting, and
right?
That's one of my favorite. Miss Marvel is one of my favorite Marvel characters and one of my favorite Marvel TV series. I just love that character and those comics so much. And I just picked up the first volume of Nyx, or NYX, I guess, that she's featured in, with some other like X-Men characters too, and I'm very excited to read that, because I am pretty sure there's at least one queer character in that book. But yeah,
I'm talking about this picture with a little interest and a little enthusiasm, but you're also talking about these creations being commodified. Does it sometimes ring a little hollow to you when they bring these characters out and put a big Pride sticker on, and then they're like, well, okay, no, not enough of that?
Yeah, I for sure. I think it reads hollow when these characters are not really being utilized in other spaces, or if they're only featured in like miniseries, or as an occasional guest star in another series. I think, just given the political climate and the way that various companies are walking back like their DEI initiatives, I think it's when you read stories about that, specifically like with Disney walking back that stuff and like wondering how it's going to affect Marvel stories, but then you see these like Marvel Voices comics, it feels disingenuous. It feels very like, well, we're not going to tell these stories anymore, or not as extensively as we were, but here's a Pride Month comic for you. It feels like a little yeah, it
Some
rings
of the
untrue. But
some of the tension that I felt watching Ironheart, for example, and I've only seen the first 3 episodes. I'm not going to spoiler it or anything for you, but I did feel there was a certain tension between trying to like showcase representation without pissing off conservatives, and like I don't know if they've quite. There's something about it that feels very strange to me. It feels very fraught.
and there's also, the fact that Ironheart was filmed several years ago and they like just didn't release it, and they didn't really market it very well. So there's, they create this thing that does have representation, but then they don't support it. So it feels,
I think
and
there's
then
a
they
certain cynicism sometimes in how these things are handled when they do this.
yeah. Yes, and then they blame the fact like, oh, it wasn't successful, blah blah blah. But like again, like they didn't market it very well, and it premiered like years after they said it would, and so it's interesting too to see conversations like that where it's like they're claiming failure, but then like you saw it too with like I don't. I how do I say
This is a
things?
safe space. Yeah.
Yeah, like the movie The Marvels, I feel like people attacked it and were, there was just this conversation about how it failed, but it made a ton of money and I thought it was an entertaining movie. I enjoyed it and I love those three characters. So like, and the same with like the first Captain Marvel movie. I think, there was a lot said about Brie Larson during the press tour, and I just think the way that they spin things sometimes and then use that to like call a movie a failure, I really, it does not sit well with me. Actually, I have an article that's like, it's linked on my website, but it's about the movie Birds of Prey.
Oh,
And
that's such a good movie, honestly. Banger.
Yeah, I love that movie and I will forever defend it because it was so yeah, it's wonderful. And but we saw the same thing happen with Birds of Prey where it did well for a movie of like for the budget that it was made on, and
it's a much
for
smaller scale superhero flick than it's a much smaller scale in terms of like the scope of the story that they're telling and in terms of like the budget that's displayed on screen. But I think that works in its favor.
I would agree, and like the creative team behind it was amazing. Like Kathy Yan, is that her name? Who directed it was like, I just thought it was so like, it was shot so beautifully. The action sequences were so interesting. The cast was great. But because it didn't make as much as like, I don't know, Justice League or something,
Right.
they were like, oh, it's a failure. We can't have girl superhero movies or blah blah blah. And so I that also is something that just drives me crazy. Sorry, I'm
that's okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just about to say we go on to the next slide maybe.
Oh yes, and I'm just opening a can of water, so I apologize. So yeah,
we've
talked.
I can go on tangents forever. It's hard. That's one of the things about being in a chat with me. I'll ask you so many questions. We'll talk for hours. I don't want to keep you forever.
I appreciate questions, so I welcome them. So yeah, we've been talking a lot about Marvel and DC, but I did want to share some there are other great queer stories being created outside of those spaces. I mentioned Sina Grace. Sina Grace has Rockstar and Soft Boy, which is a wonderful kind of limited series, but he's also written a bunch of other works. He wrote the Iceman solo series for Marvel, but he wrote Ghosted in LA, which was a fun read. The West Hollywood Monster Squad, which came out, I think, the beginning of this year. What else? He also did the Superman Harvest of Youth story, which came out recently, which was also really great and had wonderful Smallville vibes. And then Tilly Walden is a wonderful queer creator. On a Sunbeam is extremely moving. The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos. James Heinian and Isaac Goodhart. I know both of them identify as queer in different ways, but that's a wonderful story, and the main character is queer, and the art is beautiful, and that's also a fun read. The Magic Fish, Homebody. So there's a ton of stuff out there, and I highly encourage you. The next slide I talk about, like, where can you find these things? Go to your local library and ask, or look it up on the Libby app. If you have the Libby app, highly encourage people to use that for reading, and it supports your local libraries. There's actually on Libby, there is a queer database too. I'm just gonna pull mine up really quick so I can tell you what it's called, but it's national and anyone can join. It is called the Queer Liberation Library, but they have a ton of stuff. And then encourage you to go to your local comic book store and ask people what they have, or tell them what you like and see if they can make a recommendation. I feel like when I first started going to comic book stores when I was like 12ish, like I knew I was interested in X-Men, so I grabbed a bunch of those, and then after developing a kind of relationship with the employees there, asking them like, well, what do you think I would like, kind of based on what I get in weekly, and they would give me recommendations, and soon it got out of control and I just had to stop. Like I was like, I can't get all these comics all the time. But or bookshop.org is a great website that uses local bookstores as well. Brown Pop Culture Library, which we talked about, and then just Google things. Google is your friend. Reddit, people are happy to share opinions on there, for good or for bad. And then the Comic Studies Society too is a great space for people to get involved in, and the website was linked earlier in the PowerPoint, but it's open to everyone, not just people who are like working in education, but it's open to like community members as well. They have different cohorts for different people. So they just started a K through 12 cohort, but there's also like a community cohort, and we have social media that people will share things on too. So just the stories are out there, and they are constantly being I feel like they're constantly being silenced. Like, I think I was saying this earlier to you, but when you see like a banned book week, for example, like a lot of it is comics that feature queer characters, or who are written, or that are written by queer people. So the Magic Fish was on a lot of banned book lists. The graphic novel Flamer, genderqueer, but
yeah, we are going through a similar crisis today, this week, in video games, with many, many video games getting pulled. I'm going to do another video about this probably as soon as this weekend, because it's such a hot breaking news topic. But video games are under attack again by conservative groups that want to censor queer and adult content. Surprise, surprise, shock, shock. That never happens. It happens all the time. And they're now deciding to, to use various adult video games, mostly pornographic ones, as a lever to remove queer games from storefronts.
Yeah, which, I... And every time that happens, and they do that with books, they do that with movies too, right? And every time that happens, they're using examples that children are not even reading or don't have access to, and to justify why they're taking away other books that are for children, which it's so it's infuriating.
And I think that means, for comics in particular, because there was so much of this is an art form for children, we can't allow children to see adult things, and gay people are adult things. That's not a thing children should know about. That's why there was a lot of that had to be underground. It wasn't mainstream.
Exactly. And that's also why, in comic studies, we always emphasize, like, comics is not a genre. It's not one thing. It's a medium, right? And like through that medium, there are so many different stories that can be told, and so many different audiences that can be, that can be entertained by these stories. And so it's when they start to take away books like Genderqueer or Flamer or whatever, I feel like they just have the wrong idea in mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think that brings us to Q&A. Yes?
Yes, yeah. So happy to answer any questions. I don't know. Would you like me?
Thank you so much for putting together a presentation. We wanted to do this during Pride Month, and we put it off because you were still working on moving your office and a bunch of other things that were a lot of work. But I'm really, really glad I had the opportunity to talk with you about this, because it's a thing that's been on my mind a lot. As a geek, as a nerd, as somebody who's been reading comics my whole life, and just the way that people talk about things. Things used to be different. And I mean, I can see, like, from your timeline, yeah, there definitely has been a change in how we talk about these things. But it's first question from the chat: who is your favorite comic book character, and why is it Snowflame? This was the last time I pushed the Snowflame. But are you familiar with Snowflame? He's in the Harley Quinn show, so yeah, you are, maybe.
Oh, is he? So, like, I feel like I haven't watched the series in a while, so I don't recall who Snowflame is.
Snowflame is the guy who gets his powers from snorting cocaine. That's yeah. he's on the show and he has the big pile of cocaine, and he's like, yeah, that's a real DC character. He was a character, I guess, in the 80s? Question mark? I don't remember. I'm not a DC person, but
I feel like if I said that was my favorite character, the pull quote would just be, like, angry gay liberal likes cocaine character or something. I don't know.
Who is your favorite comic book character, actually?
Ooh, oh gosh, that's hard.
I know it's hard. I know it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, Miss Marvel is probably for sure one of my favorite characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I was, the X-Men as a team, like, they are my top choice all the time. I think that they are just full of drama, and I love them. And I will say, because I was having a conversation with a friend recently about, like, Batman versus Superman, I will say that I like Superman, and I like him because he's good and he just wants to do good, and I really appreciate that. I don't know, just to, be transparent, like you mentioned about my office moving and things, it's because, I worked for a Center for Women and Gender Equity, and centers like that are currently under attack in my state, but also in various states across the US. And our office was shut down, as was our division of inclusion and belonging. So, the kind of work that I do is working with these vulnerable populations to help them get resources and services that they need, to give them a space that they need to feel welcome and safe and comfortable on campus. And so I think that I think I was drawn to this kind of work because of the things that I liked when I was younger, like the X-Men and like Superman and like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah.
And if chat already knows this, but my favorite comics character is Deadpool. So.
Excellent choice.
I have to tell you my Ms. Marvel story, because this is I went to Disneyland last year. I've told the story on stream before, but in case anybody doesn't know that, I'm not telling you the story. But I went to Disneyland last year because they had Deadpool there for like 2 months, and I was like, I'm gonna drop everything and go meet Deadpool in Disneyland. So I went to Disneyland all the way to California. And the nice thing about the Disneyland Avengers campus is that the superheroes are real approachable. They just kind of walk around, which in Disney World, you don't get that interaction anymore. It's kind of like hard to get a character interaction unless you get like a fast pass and all that BS. But Disneyland, they're pretty approachable. So we saw like Loki walking around. We saw Thor walking around. I saw Ms. Marvel standing over talking to a guy, and I just overheard their conversation. And the guy was like, don't you think you're a little bit PC? And he was like racist to her, like, and I'm like, dude, that's just an actress. That's not, first of all, first of all, she's just paid to be nice to you and to sign autographs for your kids. Why are you giving her a rough time over being a PC superhero? And she had to brush it off. She was like, I don't know what you mean by that. Could you clarify? And then he got embarrassed.
That is so. First of all, why antagonize someone like that at work? But yeah. I've had some friends who have worked at like I think just Disney World, actually Disney World and Disneyland, and the amount of training that they have to go through to like learn how to respond to people is I really admire just
You have to stay in character no matter what some a-hole says to you, which is cannot be easy when a guy's in your face like that about your character existing.
You mentioned Loki, and I will say one of my other favorite ensembles too is the Young Avengers, like America Chavez, Hawkeye, Wiccan, Hulkling, Kid Loki. Like I love that series by Kieran Gillen and Jamie McKelvey, I believe. Just also like great representation in that series.
Loki's a famously gender-bending character.
What's that?
Loki's a famously kind of genderqueer, gender-bending character.
Oh. Yeah, for sure.
With the female version on the TV show, and also like the character in mythology, the actual mythology of Loki.
Yes.
Chat, do we have other questions? If not, I might fire off a few myself, but feel free to chime in anytime. Thank you guys for being such a good audience today. See, I told you my chat is well behaved. Now I don't know what happens once we post this on YouTube. Some people will be like, ew. I'm gonna ask you this question because I know this is the kind of thing that people on YouTube would ask, and I know this is a hardball, but I'm gonna ask it. Right now, you were saying the programs like this, they're under attack. Politically speaking, and it's tough to get traction for these things.
Yes, I mean,
it's so. Why do you, if you had to justify, like, it's important to have these things? I know we talked a little bit about it, like from a pop culture standpoint, but like, why do we need to talk about marginalized people? Why do we need to talk about this stuff?
Yeah, so I like departments like these are under attack because I feel like humanities and the arts are always the first to be attacked when higher education is being challenged. And there is, there's a lot more value and a lot more support given to, the sciences and healthcare and business schools. I think that's great because we need those things as well. But I think when it comes to things like, the humanities, the arts, I think those teach us how to connect to people who are different from us. Mm-hmm. And so we can experience stories by people who have completely different perspectives and lived experiences than our own, and it opens our worldview and allows us to have empathy. And I think it would be boring to read stories or to watch movies or whatever if it were always just like my perspective. That would, like, I live with myself every day. I don't need to hear my story all the time, I think it's important for us to explore and to be curious and to be interested and to always be learning and always be wanting to learn. And I feel like on the internet lately, especially just given, again, the climate, you just keep seeing like why education is under attack, and that they attack like education first because they don't want an educated populace in this kind of climate. And I think that, I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, did that
No,
answer the question?
yeah, no, it does, and I know that it's a tough question, because I think that there are real people that stumble across this thing and be like, yeah, but we don't need a fucking women's studies. Who cares about that? Everybody learns to code, and I am a person who believes that the arts should somehow survive, perhaps. Um, and that culture should perhaps not just consist of robots doing productivity things, and maybe should consist of beauty and joy, and diversity is part of that to me. But
Yeah,
I
and
think there are people that think that that is stupid. Who cares?
which, yeah, which I mean,
I know it's.
I think it's like, it's like that Stan Lee quote from
Mhm,
earlier, like
mhm,
people are entitled to their hatred, but I think just to hate a certain kind of individual, like just flat out for no reason, like I mean, there's so many things that I hate, but
mhm,
like it's not it's not harmful or detrimental to anyone in my case, like I think it's harmful if you are hating, people because based on their sexuality, their gender, their
mhm,
race,
mhm.
whatever, their religion. And like it's important that we understand like why that's a bad thing, and like you learn why that's a bad thing when you study, like women's studies, ethnic studies, etc.
Because you learn the full history of what people were not allowed to speak out, perhaps, or were not allowed to be creators, and I think that that colors like what sorts of things are available to view, read, watch, because of
Yeah.
a lot of the censorship that does happen.
And studying those things too helps you to realize your own privileges that you have and your unconscious biases that you have. And a lot of people feel uncomfortable examining those things. And so,
Yeah.
that's another reason why some people don't see the value in studying like humanities or the arts, because they're afraid to kind of reconcile with themselves.
hmm hmm And I know it's a tricky question, but I'm really glad that the Pop Culture Library is doing all this work and is archiving all this stuff. Um, and do you think, like, it's despite everything, that these missions will continue?
Yes, I do think, I think that people are still going to do the work.
Hmm
And that's what so many people have said to me just in the wake of our division of
hmm
inclusion and belonging closing. People say, well, like, people are still going to do the work. The work's going to get done. It'll just get done underground or in different spaces. Um, and, part of me knows that. But then also part of me, when I
hmm
hear someone say that, I think of like, okay, but who's going to be doing the work? It's going to be the people who lost their jobs, who lost
hmm
their
hmm
livelihoods, and now are working different jobs, and then on top of those jobs, they're going to have to continue
hmm
doing the work. Like
hmm
it's not going to it's not going to be easy, and I
uh
think that there needs to be. Um, I think we need to like reach across the aisle when it comes
Right.
to certain things. And people have to be good allies and be willing to also do the work with the people who are being affected by, current
Right.
state or
Right.
federal legislations. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming out to chat about this stuff with me. Hey, if they ever need a VTuber professor, I am both of those things. I could teach a whole class on how to what the hell is VTubing.
I mean, I think that I think popular culture would 100% be interested in that. So,
Yeah, they should
yeah.
do it. They should do a seminar where the VTuber teaches you about anime and VTubing and gotcha and all the other crap that I've learned over the last few years. That'd be a great pop culture. Would you imagine a pop culture class where somebody is completely a VTuber the entire time they're teaching the class?
I mean, I think that would be pretty innovative, and also like students might be pretty used to it, just given like the COVID era
Right.
of.
We did the tele teaching for a little while, right? Everybody
I
was
mean, I
teaching on
know.
Zoom. Yeah, this is your Zoom professor. It's weird. The anime talks back to you now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was teaching during the pandemic. I was teaching,
Mm,
like synchronously via Zoom, but also
mm,
asynchronously, and then hybrid at one point, like
mhm.
when things started to kind of like go back to the classroom. But then after that, we went back to being online only, and it was a whole just kind of messy learning experience that, I mean, was great because then I got all different kinds of like experience with different kinds of modalities of teaching, um but yeah, I feel like a VTuber, is that what you said?
VTuber, yeah.
I feel like that would definitely be, especially if they ever created like an online track for the degree.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would definitely be like of interest
I
to the
could teach. I
department.
could teach video games too. I know a lot about that. Like way too much about that.
And they
Too much.
have,
Fucking much.
especially in the summers, they do have specialty courses. I know,
Sweet.
I think it was 2022, I taught a course on gender identity and sexuality in American comics.
Oh,
And
sweet.
yeah, and other people, I know that I think it was last year or 2 years ago, there was a course on like Taylor Swift that
Oh, cool.
got kind of publicized. But yeah, there's courses on
I can
everything
hear
in the
the
department.
conservatives now. I can't believe people are getting college credits in Taylor Swift. Listen, assholes.
Yeah.
It's music.
No, 1,000. Definitely good comments were being made.
I'm just gonna say it. Shut the f up.
And again, I mean, like we study, like people study popular music and people study classical music, and they tell us different things about
Well,
culture at different
there's
times.
high
So
culture and there's low culture and there's everything in between, and you don't need things to disappear just because they don't fit like a particular agenda of what is canon, right?
exactly, and the majority of people are not engaging in like what is considered high culture.
Yeah.
Like most people are not reading, like, I don't know, Moby Dick. Most
Yeah.
people are like, reading I can't think of a single popular book right now.
I just picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm gonna read that shit on the beach next week.
Yeah, they're like,
I'm
oh
gonna
my
be
god,
peak white woman on the beach. I'm excited.
romantasy, as
That's
they call it. Like,
romantasy. Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, those are all over the place. So like, and that's what everyone's reading.
Right, that's book talk,
Um,
baby.
and like, what does that tell us about our current like
People
culture? I
want
don't know.
escapism, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a less valuable form of art, I don't think.
I agree. Yeah. Um, I mean,
Where can
yeah.
everybody find you? I have your contact, but where's the best place to if people want to learn more? Your website.
Yeah, so my website is nerdbove.com, NERDBOVE. And then I use that same handle on
I'm gonna put it up on the chalkboard.
Oh, okay. Awesome. I use that same handle on Instagram and Blue Sky. I guess Threads too. I'm on Tumblr with that too, but I don't really use Tumblr that often. I just kind of use it for like looking at random like fandom things from like, I don't know, X-Men or Avatar or whatever, or cute kittens.
It's nerdbove.com.
Yeah.
A big weird little chalk font has a backwards end. There we go.
And then it's just Nerdbove, yeah, like everywhere. I don't have a Twitter account anymore, but
Well,
yeah.
that's fine. You do have a Blue Sky.
Yeah. I do have Blue Sky, yes.
And I have the Blue Sky as well, so we can connect on there as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Super cool chatting with you about this stuff. And I just have to give you like a great big thanks because like I reached out to you and was like, hey, I'm looking for somebody to just do a presentation on my channel. Like, oftentimes when I tap somebody to do one of these collabs, it's somebody that I have like had a lot more relationship with. Like we've been friends for a super long time. But honestly, I was just like, who in the pop culture library that I follow on Blue Sky and that I know they post cool shit can I talk to you about this topic? Because I really wanted to be educated on this topic, and I'm so glad that you came by.
Thank you so much for having me and for being so flexible again with like the timeline. And
Wonderful.
I really appreciate it.
This is
And this
all
was
like a
very,
favor to me. I mean, I'd like to make it up to you at some point, but maybe I will do a charity donation or some such. But maybe we'll talk a little bit later. Because I feel like we could talk for a super long time about stuff. I just feel like we've come to a good conclusion for the presentation. If people have anything else they'd like to ask in chat, or hit us up later, and we'll pass those questions along.
yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and listening.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I think I'm gonna go ahead and raid out you, and your presentation is no longer on screen, so you can go ahead and shut that off if you need to.
Okay.
There's a lot of people online today that are doing very interesting things.
Oh,
I think I'm gonna, yeah, thank you so much. Yes, you guys are wonderful. Where am I headed? Where am I going? So what we do on Twitch at the end of the stream is we raid, which means we take all of our viewers and we give them to somebody else.
oh,
And I noticed that a streamer that I followed for a long time just went live. I don't know if he's still live. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I haven't bothered Paul in a while. Are you familiar with the Phantasmagoria by chance? You were talking about this earlier today, and if you're not familiar with Phantasmagoria, it's one of those banned controversial games.
oh,
It's an
okay.
old game.
No.
It's an old game. So the lead actor from Phantasmagoria 2, who was one of the earliest bisexual characters in a video game, is actually streaming right now. So
Oh,
we'll go bother him for a little while. And if you want to learn more about that, I have resources for you. Yeah, he does a lot of like games history stuff. So I think it would be like a nice like dovetail with the comics history talk.
yeah, that's really cool.
So super cool chatting with you, and super cool having you guys in chat, watching, listening, learning. We will catch you on Saturday. My usual schedule goes up on Friday. So I have a little bit of a change in schedule because I've decided I'm going to do band book week, but I'm also going on vacation. So I'm going to go on vacation and then I'm going to stream all week. How's that sound? All right. Take care, everybody. And thank you again, Ryan, for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.